And on that note, I'm sure, ladies and gentlemen, you would agree with me when I say that data is not just the oil, but the bread and butter for all of us now. And it is very important for all of us to understand how best data should be leveraged. We have some very curated speakers with us today to bring alive perspectives and learnings on first-party data, which is the value lever for digital marketing. Our next discussion on first-party data, the value lever for digital marketing, is an initiative by MMA AMMP community. Please join me in welcoming our panelists who will share their expert opinions on the subject. Let's begin with Ms. Darshana Shah, Executive Vice President, Marketing and Digital Business Innovation, Aditya Birla Health Insurance Company Limited. Mr. Anuj Kumar, Co-founder, Chief Revenue and Operating Officer, Affle. Mr. Deepak Khurana, Co-founder and CEO, Vserv. Tejinder Gill, General Manager, the Trade Desk India. And our moderator of the session, Mr. Deepak Bakshi, Managing Director, Accenture Strategy and Consulting, India, Accenture. Yes, waiting for our team to quickly arrange the chairs for our panel discussion. Five chairs. Yep. Can we have one? Four, okay. Yes. And over to you, Deepak.
Hello everyone, good evening, and thanks for taking time for this panel discussion. We have an esteemed set of panelists here, and I look forward to this conversation. As we start, I think during the day, various conversations that you've heard, various experts have talked about marketing in today's world. My take is one of the most prominent words that you would have heard would have been data. It's most impactful, and that's playing a very critical role in how marketing is happening today across industries, not just consumer good, not just retails, across industries in our geography. It's very, very impactful. Having said that, while organizations have started to value what customer data, especially the first-party data, can really lend as a business impact, I think there is still some, so to say, hesitation, lack of conviction when it comes to really investing into first-party data, whether it's the technology, whether it's capabilities to gather it, manage the data, and then utilize it for business purposes. That's precisely the topic of our conversation today. And what I'd like to hear from our panelists is essentially from their experience, how the first-party data is a valuable asset that organizations should invest in, and what's really the way forward. How should the capabilities be really built and the value really realized for the organization. So without much ado, we'll just get into the questions and really get deep into the conversations, leveraging your experiences. So let me just start with Deepak first. You, not just that our names are same, but still, is the right question for you to ask first. I think let's demystify this for our audience here. what's the value of first-party data? What is that value that organizations can really realize? And if they were not to really invest in first-party data, what are they really missing out?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I think, so just, when we look at the keyword first-party data and we try to probably break that down and say, what is first-party data all about? What's the value of first-party data? Okay, let's just take a step back. From a marketing organization perspective, there are primarily two goals which you're always trying to chase. You want to do better retention or grow revenue from existing customers, or you want to acquire new customers. These are primarily the key objectives from a marketing organization perspective. Now, when you're looking to say that if you're a business which and a category which permits you to have information about your users or people who come and buy things from you. Okay, so then you're in a place where you are at least falling in the category where you could say that, look, because customers are engaging on my platform, they're buying on my platform, and in the process, I have some information about them, which is called first-party data. So you don't go out and say, I will build first-party data. You are basically offering a service to the customer, and in that process, you've collected first-party data. Obviously, when you are seeing all of that first-party data at your end, and I want to probably also step back and here say that this first-party data keyword, we may probably just talk about it right now, but it's a very established activity over the years. Okay, telecom operators, banks have had millions of customers on their platform. They believe that they should nurture their customers. They can only nurture their customers if they understand them, they have analytics on top of it. Okay. And just by doing it over and over, some of them may say that, look, now my systems are able to understand my existing customers and predict the next best logical offer. That could be one of the value props of, handling your first-party data. On the other side, if I were to just really dumb this down, you go to a local retail shop, you are going to an optician. That optician knows the lens which you bought, the frame which you bought, he's also got your first-party data. Okay, and then how does he leverage? He says, okay, I'm going to use it to build relationship with the customer. So I just wanted to bring out that example because you're basically saying a business is using data to either build relationships, some form of personalization, effort, and then finally try to re-engage with the customer in an effective manner so that you're hoping that through that quality engagement, the customer will be a little more loyal to me. I'll be able to do better revenues with them. So that is how I see, if I dumb it down, saying what is first-party data and what do you do with it?
That's what, no, very well said. I think the examples that it has been in place for years and years makes a lot of sense. But then we've also, especially in the digital world, we've seen this, the cookies that exist and they continue to capture data for us as visitors to various websites and apps and the data getting captured. There are also, of course, debates around cookies being phased out over a period of time in the very near future. So Tej, if you were to bring in your perspective here, are we saying that first-party data takes more and more prominence as cookies start to phase out? What's the impact we're talking there?
Sure, Deepak. I think my short answer is yes. Definitely, I think first-party data will gain more and more importance as cookies depreciate. And if you all take a step back, I think, and look at India, we are a mobile-first market. And cookies actually play a role into a desktop environment, right? Which is probably in India is roughly around 20%. So nothing to worry, like no need to panic as a marketer, right? And today, I was reading an article and almost more than half of the marketeers are still dependent on third-party cookies, right? Which is very interesting. And like Deepak said, when you look at what is important for a marketer, probably three things in my mind. One is know your customer, like most important. Second, how will you build a long-term, lifelong relationship with that customer? And third is probably how can you use your literally current campaign's intelligence and apply it to the other one, right? How can you leverage your data? And out of these three, the first one is to know your customer. And using third-party data, you can't know your customer. So that's one of the prime reasons you need to build it. It is becoming like more and more important. Second thing is, I think if you take the third-party data into consideration, targeting will not be going to be that simple and easy, which means the net media effectiveness will be going to drop. The advantages on the other side for first-party data is it's unique. It's unique to every brand. You have a competitive edge. First-party data, like Deepak said, for banking would be very different from a car company, right? You can also have a very cost-effective measure when you actually capture the first-party data. And as a brand marketer, I get some more control. Like I know what this audience looks like. So I can do different data cuts. I can play around with it. And especially for cookies, I think we all need to believe that this is like a 3-decade-old technology. And I think this is a time for us to celebrate that it's going away. And cookies do not apply into all modern channels, right? Whether it's CTV, mobile, audio, right? So time has come. I think it is time for us to celebrate, to say, okay, good luck, rest in peace, cookies, but better identifiers are coming into the market, better identity solutions are coming into the market, to where I personally believe they all need to be interoperable, talk to each other, so that the entire ecosystem can probably leverage it. Yeah.
Excellent. So then, obviously, with this kind of a value that both of you talked about, right, that yes, first-party data is critical, you get to engage with your consumers, personalization, long-term relationship, and then, of course, cookies phasing out, and that's the right thing. Now, where do we see the challenge in organizations really embarking on this journey of first-party data? Anuj, if you want to just highlight from your experience, what are those roadblocks? Where do organizations feel that they are unable to really get into the bandwagon? It was a lot easier in the cookie world, but as we kind of move on, what's the challenge?
So I think before I answer that question, I think it's important to understand what are the different kinds of organizations out there who could benefit. Like any organization should benefit and should leverage first-party data. Some, like with the example Deepak said about the optician, was intuitively doing that. He didn't call it first-party data, but he was doing it and building that relationship there. So I think if you look at today, there are two kinds of companies. One are the digitally first companies. Now, digitally first companies obviously have a significant advantage where they have access to a lot of consumer footprint information. So digitally first would be all your e-commerce, food tech, like all the kind of services where an app or a website is the front end through which you engage with the customer. So those companies obviously have a unique advantage. And if you see today, like all of us have been shopping online, you're going to Amazon, you're buying something, it recommends you people who bought this also bought this. If you read through the revenue reports, that's a huge contributor of revenue to Amazon. I have myself bought, and I'm sure there are many in the room who have engaged that way. So that is clearly a way they are leveraging first-party data, but they have a unique advantage because they are built a business which is digitally first, which allows them to harness the power of first-party data. The challenge comes in that there are also the traditional world companies which are non-digitally first, where the transactions with those brands, engagements with those brands are actually happening in the offline world. And there is no direct customer connect. So a telco or a fintech company has a direct customer connect. Even though you may engage with them on physical channels, the company knows who you are. But if you are selling an FMCG and you're walking into a DMart and buying that, the FMCG guy may not even know who's bought their product. So the challenge for digitally first companies, I think, is much simpler. And that's where you see the adoption of first-party data a lot more there. For the traditional old world companies, I think the challenge is where to start. Because the way they have built their organizations are so siloed that one part is not talking to the other. Data was never seen as a central part of those organizations because that's the way they have been built. So I think it's a DNA change, and I think DNA change requires the most amount of time because it has to be pushed on people because naturally it may not happen. And you see it around that there are so many companies, like you've seen this boom of D2C brands which have come in. Now, D2C brands have largely come in there and disrupted the old world brands who had spent millions of dollars in building affinity with the customers. And suddenly you see these D2C brands do that, because what is making them unique? What is making them unique is their products. In some cases might be better, in some cases not. I have no authority to talk about that. But assuming that product parity is almost the same, it's largely how they have been leveraging that data. The same things could have been done by the old world companies, but they were possibly not wired that way. They were not thinking that way. And I think starting that as a DNA culture, you see some organizations doing it better versus others, but I think it's high time that otherwise the traditional world is waiting to get disrupted by these digitally first phenomena which we are seeing all around us these days.
So with that realization that yes, I need to have that data, we have not been wired that way, and that's really how we should start thinking about. On the ground for such organizations, what's the starting point? What should they do? Now that the realization has come, we have to really do this, we have to get on this journey. What's the right starting point? Deepak, if you want to share something, where do they start? Start collecting the data? You said that's not what we're talking about.
I just have a little contrarian view to what Anuj mentioned. So first part is that I feel that, the point here is that, let me put it this way. I think people collecting data, or people, and the process which enabled them to collect data, if we look at it, how that has happened, fundamentally any business which was at the point of sale with the customer. Okay, so if you're a business of any form, whether it's an old business or a new business, if you're a digital first business or a legacy first business, if your business permitted you to collect point of sale data. Okay, now if I was a retailer, I am Big Bazaar, I am collecting point of sale data, correct? Okay, now FMCG is relying on someone else's distribution. They are a product company. They are not a distribution company as such. They will have partnerships with distributors who in turn will distribute it, right? So hence, for those companies, I think, at that point of time, they're busy building a brand, right? Because someone else is distributing the product. So first part is whether these companies, so I hope first point is clear that we are talking that data creation has happened only at point of sale. When we look at Amazon or any digital first brand also, they are today doing the whole value chain end to end, which includes the checkout as well, right? And hence they are in a position to collect that data. Okay, now coming back to the point that your question was around that what should a company like,
how should they start?
How should they start?
Yeah.
And probably to just contextualize that is, I think it's a no-brainer for companies which are doing the whole process end to end, including the point of sale. They don't need to think how to start, right? The question really boils down to, if you're asking me what should Unilever do? Okay, I can't give a good answer to that. Okay, but what I know is that, for example, P&G, what we know what they've done over time, okay, they've done a lot of secondary research on ground, where they would do surveys. Okay, now if you ask P&G will say, I have first party data. And you ask them, okay, tell me, how did you manufacture that first party data, right? Because you were not involved at the point of sale. So next thing you realize that, okay, you know what, over the last 20 years, X salespeople in the market, okay, doing surveys, and now I have that data which is sitting about 30 million people. So they may come back and say, listen, I have a hack to start my first party data piece. Yeah. So my understanding is that I don't think it is easy for an FMCG company which is not involved there, okay, to do that. I think the best thing for them is not really go out and solve that problem, but really focus on their business and do partnerships with businesses which allow them to leverage that first party data. Like, that's how I think about it.
Is there any other fast-paced way to kind of bypass this lag that FMCG companies have developed, right? They're lagging behind, they don't have the data. Now, how do you start getting onto that bandwagon? As Deepak, you mentioned that, yes, let's partner and do it. But is there any other way? Are there any capabilities that they really need to build and focus on?
Probably I can take a stab at it, and Anuj Deepak can chime in. But if you think about a little framework, I would say, rather than whether it's FMCG or car company. I think what we recommend to partners is first go and define your marketing goals, right? What do you want to solve for? Probably second most important thing is you need to do your third-party data audit, right? Look at your data, figure out how much dependency do you have currently on your third-party data providers, partners. Then take a step back, analyze what you already have and what you need, right? And thinking and tie it back to your marketing and business objectives. If I want to target to, let's say, like what is the value exchange basically between my data versus what I'm getting, right? So I've got kids, and if a company shows me a text message or ad saying, here is a great offer for your 8-year-old daughter, it's around your clothes, I think I'll be happy to do that value exchange, I would say, right? And as an ecosystem, we have never explained that very clearly to the consumers, right? So I think do your audit, look at what you have, look at what you want, start collaborating with partners like Deepak said, like, I don't think so a single brand can just build it on their own. Like it is an ecosystem, you need to get the support of the partners and then have the right machinery which can take this forward. But love to hear.
I just want to add, since Tej mentioned about value exchange, it's a very relevant point because you have to go out and figure out what's the value exchange. I'm an FMCG company. I'm just talking not from a digital native brand perspective, but the biggest challenge on the endeavor to collect first-party data is for an FMCG company, in my view. So I think another hack which an FMCG company can do is potentially leverage content to get first-party data. Like for example, I know Nestle runs a small microsite called Ask Nestle. Okay, so there the value exchange is that, listen, consumers, there is something interesting which I can offer you in form of content. Okay, and through that content you are able to get email IDs out, you're able to get some information out of people who are engaging possibly with me. So content is one currency which can be exchanged, with the user.
Fair point. And now that we're talking about value exchange, and we talked about earlier on personalization, one of the use cases again on first party, that brings me to thinking about another contentious issue, which is data privacy, right? With all that cookies used to do and what we're talking about with the first party data, is the first party data world now solving for the data privacy issue on the back of consents? Is it addressing consumer sentiments in some shape or form? Anuj, your perspective?
So I think it's always important. I think if you look at it, consent, from a consumer standpoint, privacy is important. And I think one is legally safeguarding yourself. So if you see today, anywhere where you are, at least in the digitally first companies, when you're transacting with them, they're legally safeguarding themselves, that they give you a long TNC. Obviously, as a consumer, I have accepted it because I really don't have any option. But largely, if you see, what is the purpose it is being used for? Now, I don't think anyone who's getting a shopping recommendation of what they have bought, if they bought a phone, that buy a charger, which is a discount on Amazon, I think that's truly what we've described earlier. It's value exchange. Because and first party data is actually the best way where you can personalize your messaging. Because third party data, while it has many advantages, it is never and can never be as deterministic as first party data. So I think leveraging first party data well, I feel, while obviously you need to be legally protect yourself, but I think that is where, if you see even the regulation globally, because on privacy is a matter which is regulated in so many countries, whether it is with laws like a GDPR or PDP, or even by the platform operating systems themselves. And the core thing out there is that don't take away things which I don't want to share. Now in this case, where there is a value exchange, where it is first party data being known only to that brand and not being shared in the whole wide world, I think that is clearly something, the best form of data usage. And I think because it's the best form of data usage from a privacy standpoint and from an organization value add standpoint, it is obviously essential for companies to have a greater first party data strategy. Some do it, and some are blessed to have business models which are allowing them to do it. Some are struggling because their business models, like what he said, FMCG, very different business model. Like even if I want to, the starting point, I need to incentivize the user to scan his shopping cart, tell me Like Unilever does that, you scan the code and then they'll give you a discount. Then they will run a program where they will reconnect with you next time when you need that kind of a product. So I think you need to bring those incentives, because once you have built that and tied into an ID which can be reused, because you can have billions of data points, and those billions of data points are email IDs of people. If that's email IDs of people, that's the only way you can communicate with them. While there are platforms which help you in identity resolution, but those again can never be as exact. So I think what data point, and today, given that bulk of the transactions or the bulk of the internet in countries like India is happening on the mobile, the device ID is becoming that, which is largely your GAID, which is what is, as a consumer, you can always reset it. So that power is with the consumer. But if companies, even the physical world companies, are creating an incentive to capture with that device ID, I think that's a much more scalable way of building first party data, which is reusable and value add for the customer also.
You want to add a point?
Yeah, I think probably completely echo with what Anuj said. Just want to make it very simple and clear. Like, I think nobody has the right to play with personal data, right? Whether it's a brand, whether we guys as platforms or any tech partner, right? And as I mentioned earlier, I think we as an ecosystem have not done a good job of explaining the value exchange, right? What happens every day, I'm sure we all would have browsed 10, 15 websites since morning. The pop-up comes, accept cookies, you say yes, and we all move on, right? But interestingly, I think that is where the change needs to happen. It should clearly say that, okay, what is getting collected, why it is getting collected, and what value it will give you to as a consumer. Interestingly, we did a YouGov survey last year. I'm referring to a couple of data points here. 75% of Indians are concerned about how data is getting collected and used, okay? But 61% people in India are comfortable if they have the control of the data, if they know when can they switch it on, switch it off, why they are getting used. Like, that's the difference, right? And I think consumer privacy is like gold, and that is the future. Like, data is everything, but I think as an ecosystem, it's in probably our interest that we need to always wear a hat of a consumer first before, running businesses. And I think there is a time have come where, again, celebration of cookies, but then a new identifier should take birth, which should be interoperable, should put consumers in the front seat. They should have the choice whether they want to probably share their data with any brand or a marketer. And I think that is where I feel that there will be no single identity solution, but it will be a combination of many of them, right? Which will be the future. But definitely, I think cookies is dead.
Sure, no, absolutely. And just closing the loop on this, given it's all data conversation and without insights, data is what it is. Last quick reflections from you on how would the measurement really change for organizations when they have been using marketing in a particular way, now they start to switch more to first party data. Is there an impact on analytics, insights, measurement as you see changing?
So I think once you are leveraging and using that data, I think the most important thing is your measurement of ROI. Because finally, if you see why does somebody advertise? They advertise not because they like to see their brand on a channel. They advertise because they want to get new customers, get their customers have repeat transactions. And once you can layer that what impact of that is leading on the first party data on actual sale, I think a lot more advertising would be ROI conversion centric. And I think that is where things are evolving. And as I said even earlier, the digitally first companies are anyway there. The others which are not digitally first, or those who are either digitally first and not leveraging first party data well, once they start doing it, I think advertising becomes more ROI-led, more measurement-led, and I think that is clearly valuable, because today there is so much money being spent. But with that money, what the brand is deriving out of it, and in some cases, obviously, he's building association for the long term. Some categories are such that you would not buy it tomorrow. But larger part of advertising would be ROI conversion-led, and I think that's really where I see the industry moving.
Absolutely.
In fact, just to add, when you're looking at measuring outputs from or business outcomes or campaign outcomes with your first party data. It's very simple because it makes it very simple because you have a deterministic identifier in your system. If you're leveraging that deterministic identifier in your system and you're running campaigns on that deterministic identifier, you're able to then easily look back into your system whether the customer has come back, what frequency is he coming back, so on and so forth. So I don't think that is a challenge when you're talking about first party data, which is deterministic in nature and seeing whether I can drive return on investments on my campaigns there. In fact, on the contrary, because it is so measurable, that is why brands are motivated to collect first party data. They believe that, okay, it is measurable for us. Yeah. I think the area which brands over time will start to realize, in my view, is that whatever said and done, whatever the ambition of many of the brands could be, the quantum of first party data which they would represent and they would have will really be a small portion. Okay, so then the next thing would be that, okay, fine, what do I do in an ecosystem so that I can find similar people? See, today, for example, what does a brand do? The brand would have their first party data, they would put it on Facebook or they would put it on Google. And then they will rely on Google and Facebook to find similar audiences.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
So
your ability to do that.
So you're basically relying on another platform to find similar users. And then you run a campaign on similar users to see whether they are delivering or not. That's one area which is happening. I think over a period of time, brands will not rely on just Google and Facebook. Okay, there are alternatives out there where you would say that, look, it is my data, it is my lookalike, and it is my campaign.
Yeah.
It's going to break away,
Yeah.
fully and not rely only on the publisher platform.
Absolutely agree. Tej, closing comments from you.
Amazing. Completely echo with what Anuj and Deepak said. Maybe two more additions to it. One is, yes, gone are the days of CPC, CPCVs. I think the world is more becoming attractive towards measuring business outcomes. How many footfalls happened for my car dealership is a clear answer a CMO needs today. And second is, I think marketers are probably becoming more and more aware about how to compare cross-channel measurement, like how my CTV campaign worked with audio, with video, right? That triangulation needs to happen. And unfortunately, something like cookies cannot help that, right? Because they work only in one set of domain. So yeah, probably we are already running late, so I think we are good. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you for a very engaging set of discussions and sharing your experiences to these questions. I hope the audience also liked it. Again, just thanks a lot and pleasure to have you on board here. Thank you.